The Mandalorian and Grogu has somehow gone from one of the safest bets in Star Wars to one of the most questioned projects Lucasfilm has. And I honestly think expectations, not so the movie itself, are the biggest reason why. Let's talk about it. Hey everybody, my name is Troy. Welcome back to the channel. Today I want to talk about The Mandalorian and Grogu, set to hit theaters in about 2 weeks. As even in these 2 weeks out, I feel like the energy and vibes of this movie still seem off. And I just think that maybe our expectations are affecting how we're viewing this movie. The conversation around this movie feels very different now compared to when it was first announced. I think Din and Grogu went from being the faces of the modern Star Wars success to suddenly being lumped into the larger online negativity around Star Wars in itself. And I think it's unfortunate and safe to say the marketing maybe hasn't helped that conversation. It's been questionable at best. I think maybe Disney and Lucasfilm has struggled to figure out how they want to market this movie and set our expectations. So that has to be said. Like I said, just because some of their decision making has been very questionable, and especially with the Super Bowl ad and just some things after the fact. And I think they're trying to do a lot of things now that I think are really properly setting the tone for this movie. But I think it's clear that maybe our expectations for what we originally thought this movie was going to be may be affecting how we just view it now. And I think maybe what the movie we're going to get, I still think could be what ultimately we need as Star Wars fans. Because when I think Lucasfilm first announced this movie, a lot of fans assumed this would be that massive Mando-Verse crossover event, that they kind of teased and set up for a long time. I think we expected the presence of Boba Fett, Ahsoka, Thrawn, some of these other major pieces that we've seen in the first order over the last, few seasons of The Mandalorian. So I think we expected that big crossover event to finally, fill in all the gaps that led up to the sequel trilogy and how the First Order rose to power. But I think it's been clear based off the latest marketing for this movie that this isn't going to be that type of film at all. I think we almost expected this giant lore heavy bridge with these massive implications for the sequel era, when in reality, I think this movie is going to be what highlights the strength of The Mandalorian and giving us just those fun across the galaxy type adventures. Because since that first trailer, it feels that obvious that they want this movie to be something much simpler. It does look like a contained adventure, a fun theatrical Star Wars experience, and Din and Grogu going on another journey together. And honestly, that's okay. That's fine, because I think it reminds us as to why we fell in love with these characters in the first place. It's no secret that season 3's reception was not as strong as season 1 and 2. And I think it's because season 3 tried to lean more into the sequel trilogy era and kind of starting to really bridge those gaps. And I think that's where it kind of lost a lot of people. I mean, there was the kind of unexpected cameos too, but it was, like I said, no secret that people kind of got turned off by season 3. It just wasn't as well received. And I think based off of this trailer, they're really leaning into what made us fall in love with these two characters in the first place. Because the biggest success of The Mandalorian has always been Din and Grogu themselves. People fell in love with the Western style storytelling, the adventure of the week format, exploring new corners of the galaxy, the emotional bond between these two characters. That's why we fell in love with them. It is all of these things. And so it really feels like this movie is going to be heavily leaning into the lore of why we fell in love with these characters in the first place. Yes, the show kind of filled in some sequel era gaps along the way, but that wasn't its original focus in those first couple seasons. It was that week to week adventure, seeing what was coming next, how Grogu fit in this universe. And while I still hope they answer some of those questions, I do think that this movie is just going to provide something that's really entertaining to us fans, maybe in a smaller scale down what season 4 would have been. I know there's been some conversations Jon Favreau has had about what his intentions were for a season 4, but I think this movie just wants us to sit back and have fun and see two characters that we love go on another adventure across the galaxy with some added elements of like Zeb and some other Rebels characters that I think overall will be fun to see. And I think that there's nothing wrong with that, because I think it reminds us as to why we love these stories in the first place. There are advantages to telling this smaller self-contained Star Wars story. There's less baggage, lower barrier for casual audiences. There's more freedom creatively. There's less pressure of setting up details that they need to follow through on in the future. And sometimes Star Wars works best when it's just cool worlds, exciting action, memorable characters, and that level of emotional storytelling that's really important to us fans. I mean, just think about Maul Shadowlore and the success that it's had this past, month or so with exploring the depth and emotional levels of this character and going into new places too. I think that if this film kind of leans more into that, I think it will be a success and it'll be fun to see. And I think that's part of why I feel really excited about Starfighter coming next year. It's a more standalone Star Wars story that can feel really refreshing right now. And not every project has to connect to decades worth of storytelling. And so I think that with the way that this trailer has in the marketing of late has presented the Mandalorian Grogu, I think that we can expect that from this movie is just a self-contained story that wants you to have fun and remember why you love these characters. And I think if it does that, then I think it's going to be a win. But there is still a massive amount of pressure on this movie. This is the first Star Wars film since the Rise of Skywalker. Again, obviously, we all have our thoughts and opinions of the sequel trilogy, and there is a lot of pressure on this film to deliver. And right now, it's not tracking to have a huge box office run. Maybe that changes if reception is positive. I heard the embargo is going to be lifted this week, a full week before the movie. So I think Disney and Lucasfilm has to feel some level of comfort and positivity around this movie that it's going to be received very well. But again, there's a lot of pressure on it. I mean, that's why I included it on my top 10 of this year most anticipated because of that reason. And I think its level of success could determine and dictate what future Star Wars films they create. There's a change of the guard, so to speak, with Dave Filoni officially taking over for Kathleen Kennedy. And so I think he's going to be evaluating how this movie does with, characters that he was heavily involved with and what that means for the future of Star Wars that he wants to tell. And so there is a lot riding on this movie. I think just the expectation game, if we just think about what this movie wants to accomplish and how it may be different than what we originally thought this movie was going to be. I don't think there's anything wrong with what they want to set up, but I think changing our mindset is going to this movie may impact the level of enjoyment that we have. At the end of the day, maybe The Mandalorian and Grogu doesn't need to be the biggest Star Wars story ever told. Maybe it just needs to remind us why we loved going on adventures in this galaxy far, far away in the first place. And if it can deliver what made us fall in love with Din and Grogu in the first place, again, I think it's going to be a win. I think it'll be a massive win, and I think us fans will be satisfied ultimately in what they deliver. But what do you guys think? I'm curious to know. 2 weeks out from The Mandalorian and Grogu, how are we feeling about it? I'm just really curious. How do you feel about this movie? How have your expectations changed over the last several months as the trailers and marketing for this movie has come out? Be curious to know how you're feeling about it 2 weeks out. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. But if you like this video, leave a like, subscribe to see the future stuff, and thanks for tuning in.